Welcome back, Remote Islanders. So, today I have with me someone very special to me. Not like other guests weren't special, but this one is really close to my heart because this is my cousin, Kieran. He is an amazing remote worker and he's been in this for a little while. So, he's going to just do a little introduction and then we're going to get into my questions.
Okay, hi Sasha. Yes, so that's the first thing I guess your listeners should know. We are first cousins and we
Yes.
are close cousins because we actually lived 10 feet across from each other at one point in
Yes, we
time.
did.
So many childhood memories, but we'll spare them the horrors of childhood. So let me just jump into it. Thank you for having me here, and just to give your listeners a bit of an introduction. So I'm very multifaceted, and it's not because I get bored. It's just because I think that we are here to experience so much of life that I have not been in a typical corporate job since 2009. We're in 2025,
Wow.
really long time. I did have a couple stints, of course, like most people. Sometimes you go back. 9 months here or 12 months there, and I just every time realized the shirt and tie, especially in our climate, was not for me. So the first thing to introduce myself, I don't like to start with work. I always remind myself about the fact that we're not just here to work. So the first thing I would say, and you know this, I'm a son to two amazing parents. My mom passed when I
Yes.
was a kid, and my dad passed 2 years ago, and I think they
Yes,
were both wonderful people from what I knew of them. I'm a
they
brother,
were.
I'm a nephew. So those are the titles that I like to start with. But my favorite
Right.
title, I think, is my favorite, and you would understand this. I think I'm the coolest uncle in the world to two nieces and a
You
nephew.
are.
I have no plans to have kids, so those are the titles that I really love the most. But for the context of today as a remote worker, I have been fully remote working since 2016 full time. I started in about 2012. In
Right.
2012, I started Huckleberry Media Company, which was
Mhm.
one of the Caribbean's first remote and crowdsourced agencies. And we have to just put our mindset back to realize that in 2012, it's not like the Gen Zs today starting companies on Instagram and
No.
TikTok. It was actually embarrassing to be a remote worker in 2012. So much so that I just started the company and I never let anybody know that that's what I did. It was
Wow.
almost like a little bit of a shameful thing to be like, I don't go to an office every day, so you don't have a real job. And also, from the jump, we never wanted Huckleberry Media Company to be a brick and mortar. We tried to cut that rent cost out and pass the savings on to clients. So that's the
Right.
first thing in 2012. All throughout my life, I've also been a writer. So in 2022, I decided to formalize that after 12 years as a journalist, an independent journalist with Newsday. I had an amazing run with Newsday, telling well over 3 million words, I think 2,500 interviews and profiles, mostly with women like yourself doing
Yes.
amazing things in the supplement that was women. So I was there for 12 years. And in 2022, during the lockdown, with social media just being up in a strange place, I actually created my independent writing consultancy, which is under my name, Kieran Khan, or Kieran Can. So that's
Yes.
also what I do. So those are my two primary businesses. In addition to that, I am also a certified wellness practitioner. I was certified in January of this year after a year with Mind Valley. So I'm a certified whole body coach with Mind Valley. So that's something I do
Okay.
so far recreationally. Uh,
Okay.
and currently, I'm actually training in videography as well because all of social media, for better or for worse, has shifted into videos. So that's
Yes.
a good run of what I do and something that your listeners might like to hear as well. If they're hearing my voice and they might say, I know the voice, I'm actually a drive time radio host on Heartbeat Radio 3
Yes. I
in Trinidad.
I was definitely going to bring that up, and there is one other thing I want to bring up, but that'll be later in the interview.
So, yes.
But you definitely multifaceted, and I think that is one of the great things about remote work. You have the opportunity to do a lot of different things. We were just talking about flexibility and what that means. Now, people have this misconception that flexibility means that you can do anything at any time, but it really is about great time management and being able to fit all the things that you want to do and what you need to get done into a day or a week or a month, right? So, what I want to ask first of all, in terms of managing all your portfolios, because that's a lot, right? How
Mhm.
do you do that?
That Okay, so that is I think the sweet spot, and that is exactly what I wanted to start off with.
Right.
Um, so when people hear the number of things that I do, it's sort of like if you're in a cocktail party and it's like, what do you do? I'm like, how much time do you have? Because
Yes.
so the first thing I have to say is most people actually don't know how much time they have. So
Yes.
we don't know how much time we're allowed on this rock circling the sun. We just don't
True.
know. So what we actually do know is that we have a weekly allowance. So if we just look at each week. So if I was to ask you, um, let me just ask you like a generic question. How often do you or would you work out a week? How would you answer that question?
So I will tell you, I just started working out. I'm on week 7 of working out, so I'm doing 2 days a week, and that is about an hour and a half on those 2 days. So because I've realized that work life balance is very important. So it is something that I have started taking very seriously. But I know for a lot of remote workers, that's not something they think about, that whole. You tend to be very connected to it. And when you have many portfolios like you do, you really have to take the time to make time for yourself.
Yes. So time management is one of the toughest things in a Caribbean environment where we treat time as if it's infinite. And time is
Yes,
probably the only thing we spend without knowing the balance.
that's
We would
right.
not spend our money not knowing the balance. We'd hit a zero. But because
Yes,
we never hit zero, we think time is infinite. And I always tell people when they, not so much when they waste my time, but if they're booking a meeting with me, I just remind them, time is the one thing that I can't make more of. I can
yes,
probably improve my health. I can probably, maybe I can make more money, but I can't make more time. So
right.
I'll give you like my breakdown of how I go about that because my
Yes,
time is managed extremely critically well. So I only started this about 2.5 years ago, which was around the time my dad actually had passed away. Because I spent about,
right.
I would say about four, I would say about 20 hours a week with him, taking care of him, which is
Yes,
half of a typical work week. And after that, I had this infinite amount of time, it felt like, and I'm like, no, you don't, because you have so many things to do. So I don't
hmm,
look at, like, if I ask somebody how often do you work out a week, they would say I work out 3 days a week, or I work out X number. But you, as a remote worker, actually, interestingly, you said I work out 1.5 hours a day, thereabout. So you know how important the hour is. So I
yes,
look at it, I don't work out 3 days a week. I actually work out about 6 hours out of 168 hours a week. And that puts it into a different context because
yes,
7 days a week, 24 hours a day, that gives you 168 hours a week, right?
yeah,
This is how I then break down my time. So when I'm looking at my week, this is how it goes. We need about 8 hours
mhm.
of sleep. I That's what we should get. Everyone's
Should get,
different. Should get.
yes,
Everyone's different. Some people thrive on 6. I need at least 8 hours. So if I take those 8 hours, that's non-negotiable from 168 hours a week, not to 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week, 168 hours. That
right,
8 hours a day is 56 hours a week. So now I'm down to 112 waking hours, and that's really, really important to start with.
right.
So I do like 6 hours of exercise a week. From 112, I'm down now to 106. I do about
Okay.
an hour of TV a day, not every day, so I can minus another 6 hours. We're down to 100 hours. I just wanted to get workout and that TV
Hmm.
time down, time out. We now have 100 hours, which is crazy because most people think, oh, there are only so many days in a week. But no, after I have slept and worked out, and even watch 1 hour of TV a day, I have 100 hours a week, which is an insane
Right.
amount of time. So let's break that down. 40 hours of average work week. We now have 60 hours left. We've worked, exercised, slept, and even got some
Yes.
TV time in. So now,
Right.
what are people doing with this 60 hours that are left? If you just start to break it down, I don't want to confuse the listeners with mathematics, but out
Right.
of 60 hours that is left in a week, 2 hours a day for meals, we're down to 46 hours. Personal admin, maybe 10 hours for the week, we're down to about 36 hours. I
Right.
am single, I don't have a family. If you have a family and you spend 2 hours a day with them, you're still left with about 22
22
hours.
hours. Yeah.
Right. And if you work, for anybody that listens that actually goes to an office job, they will lose some time in commuting. They lose about 15
Yes.
hours a week. but they're still after family time, personal admin, meals, TV, exercise, and sleep. There's still 7 hours left in that week. And we're not meant to be, it's not about being productive every second of the day. It's just about having intention at most
Yes.
of your days. So for me, I break that down by the hour, and I get to
Hmm.
that spot where I'm like, well, there's some give or take time. You get stuck in traffic, you talk to a friend
Yes.
too long. I think it was Deborah that you had on. Was it Deborah?
Yes, Deborah. Hmm.
And I was listening to that, and she said, well, sometimes a friend comes over, and you don't want to say to
Yes.
your friend, well, you're not a time Nazi. Well, it's 11:48, so you have 12 minutes left to get out my house.
Yes.
Use those 7 hours that are left, right? But if you
Yeah.
don't have a family and you're not spending commuting time, you have about 30 hours left. And my question is, what are people doing with that? So
Right.
now that you have measured the time, because what gets measured gets managed is the
Right.
big takeaway here. If you're not measuring what you're doing with your time, so the ideal thing is you want to have a sense of what you're doing with your time. Step one, so you
Hmm.
time audit, and then time two, part two, start to time delegate, right? So
Right.
for me, after having that week long view, I then kind of go into the time management of the day. So how that works
Okay.
for me is on Saturday morning, Friday night, depending, I don't really go out that much again, but on Friday night, or Saturday morning, I get up and everything that I just told you there gets plugged into. So I use Google Calendar. It's great. Get a free Gmail account,
Yes.
set up your Google Calendar, and I go in there and I start to take those blocks I talked about: 8 hours of sleep, 2 hours a day for workouts or whatever it is that you need, meal time, meditation in the morning, prayer, reading. You put those blocks in because the biggest mistake most remote workers make is that they prioritize their clients' needs. And if you're
Yes.
a family person, you'd obviously prioritize your family first. But you are a human being, you have to be. So you have to
Yes.
put the being time in first. That eating, sleeping, resting,
Hmm.
shower, mall, whatever it is you want to do, coffee with friends, you put all those in first. So anybody that's new to, I don't think people use Google Calendar properly. What you have to do is you go onto Google Calendar and then you create individualized calendars, meaning you create a calendar. I have a calendar called Kieran Khan Personal, and that
Hmm.
all of my personal aspects go in there. Then
Okay.
what goes after that? Um, I might have maybe, okay, after personal, I might say, okay, meetings. After that, I might have, oh,
Right.
let's say family time. You plug that in with social events as calendar number two.
Hmm.
And on Google Calendar, you have little check boxes. You subscribe to
Yes.
these calendars and you can see what's free and what's not. And after you've plugged in that, then I plug in meetings, which are either I have two calendars, virtual or in person. Because in
Right.
person, you need some transit time. Virtual,
Yes.
I just need 2 minutes, like today. So this is on my virtual meeting calendar. When you
Right.
have those plugged in, your personal time, your meetings, everything's plugged in, you sit on Saturday morning. And even better, if you want to be a little OCD like me, you color code them. So my
Yes.
personal time is maroon. I know you'd get this. My
Same thing.
time
Do
is
the same thing.
right. Teal is me. So when you look at your calendar as a human being, you understand color so well. You look
Yes.
at it, and just by if you just blur your eyes a bit, like you can just get a sense of like what your life
What's
is like.
what's
And
coming up? I do that all the time. I use that color coordinating because, like, with work, with everything, all my different calendars, they're color coded differently. So at a glance, I know exactly what's coming up because of the color. So I can set my mind into the frame of whatever's going to come up.
and can I just say, I learned this from women. I learned I think I don't know if it is, but I think this is very much more maybe a female thing. Maybe I should say biological female, but we're not in the US. So I think
No.
I would sit in class and I would look at girls in class and then women in class when I was doing postgrad, and I would just be like, why do you all have nine highlighters? It's like
Yes.
men have a pen, women
Yeah.
have stationery.
Yes, we
Right.
do.
You do. It's a thing. So I learned that if you color code, it's just easy to flow, to follow.
Yes. And
Um,
it's
yeah,
visually interesting. That's the other thing I find
absolutely.
very important because notes, if I have color coded, it makes me want to read it as opposed to just plain black and white, which is why anything that I do is color coordinated. If you look at my post-its, all of those things are all colored for different reasons. And at a glance, you know exactly what relates to what.
Yeah. So, and the coolest thing about this is after you've done your time audit of how you're spending your time, you just keep a rough track of how you spend your
Yes.
time. That's your life today. Then you
Hmm.
know what you want your life to be. So you just started getting your exercise routine in, which was
Yes.
for a mom, that's great. And I always encourage that for anybody. But after you do what your life is, you do what you want your life to be. And when I first started it, I was not in the gym several days a week. I was not even running. I was not doing any, I was not actually reading, and I love to read. I actually put these things onto my calendar, and it took about, so I put it on my calendar as a recurring event, and it pops up on my phone. You should be reading. Yeah, I want to binge episode number 4 of Netflix, but I'm like, no, my
Right.
calendar reminds me. So eventually you move towards your ideal life. Now,
Yes.
when you've audited and then you've started to plug this into your calendar, you do it on a Saturday morning. When you get up as a remote worker on Monday morning, when your family has left the house, when you feel like you've been hit by a brick because you're like, which way is up, which way is down,
Yeah.
you have the equivalent of like a virtual assistant that planned your day out for you. So you look
Hmm.
at the calendar and you go, so my day, for instance, like it starts a certain way, and then I would have deep work, and then I would have gym time, and then I would have less deep work, and then I'll have radio. So I have a sense of my day. So if I start my day and I don't know what's up, at least I know this is my time for writing, this is my time for social media
Yes.
design, this is my time for, I see my meetings laid out, I take my meetings requests and I plug them in. And it's awesome because a virtual assistant, aka you, has basically planned your day and your week ahead. And
Yeah.
if you ever lose track, if someone's just lingering a little too long with you, you can look at your phone and go, oh, I missed that hour of writing that I needed to do. And you just grab it on Google Calendar and move it to
And
another
move
time.
it.
And
Yeah.
therefore you add structure to your day,
Yeah.
which is kind of like part 2, but we'll get to that. That's the
But it's so
paper.
interesting that you brought that up because my next episode is about creating a routine because I have found that to be very important for me, especially as a remote worker where you don't have to get up and get dressed and go anywhere. The it was really important for me to set up a routine for myself because I found that when I first started, that lack of structure had me kind of like wondering what to do with myself. So I have made it a point, get up, eat breakfast, get dressed, and sit by my desk because I needed to have that sort of structure because it also helped me to be productive, right? To get my mind in a gear that, okay, we're going from home to work mode. And I think the problem lies in the fact that you are working in a space that is for living as opposed to working.
Yeah,
So, in that light, what do you do to stay productive? Because you are in a very creative sort of career. You know, it's not like a lot, some of the remote workers, like in my case, my career is not a creative one. I have clients to meet, I have people to onboard. So it's a set structure, sets of rules, that kind of thing. But in your case, you are a creative. So how do you maintain your productivity in that creative space as a remote worker?
that's a huge question that I think, like I said, when I first started working as a remote worker, it felt fraudulent, it felt weird, it felt strange, it
Yeah,
almost embarrassing, and I didn't even have. I just worked. I mean, like to date, I built like a 6-figure agency off of a laptop kind of thing. And I always use
right.
that example if I'm talking to younger people. I go, "What are you using this for?" Look, pointing at my phone here. What are you using your phone for besides doom scrolling on TikTok? Because
Yes,
if I mean phones aren't cheap nowadays, and if you have a phone is $1,000 up and they go to like 15 grand, so like
yes,
if you're investing in a device like that, what are you actually? How is it earning you money? It's not, life is not all about money, but it's very
no,
important to have a quality of life and earn income, right? So over time I learned to have a structure. So that's also where I might differentiate from a lot of remote workers, because
yes,
I don't have one sort of get up and I'm plugged in and I'm working for a company, or I'm working maybe in one field, aka
right,
writing. I'm spanning writing, which is one sort of neural connection that is needed, which is deep work, and then design, which is also fairly creative but not as deep work. And
right,
then I, as an entrepreneur and business owner, you have taxes, you have, because we live in Trinidad, we don't always have online payments. You have to physically pick up checks,
Cool.
uh, and people want to see you. So, which is another neural network. And then, of course, when I get to my radio show at 3 p.m., my brain is fried. And then you now have to talk on air for 4 hours. So, it's
Yes.
very different ways in which your brain has to operate. So, to get around that, I break my day up. So, I always tell people when I'm talking to them about time management, I say, um, I don't have 7 days a week. The same way that I said that I don't have 7 days a week, I have 168 hours a week, which is a very different
Hmm.
way of looking at it. So everything I'm talking about here is a little bit of neurodivergency in terms of like just trying to look at it's a perception, look at the week differently. So
Hmm.
at the week differently in terms of the day, I don't have one day. Like I don't like every 24 hours. I actually don't have one day. I actually have 4 days every one day, which is what
Okay.
people then, which I'll explain. People then go, "How do you get so much done in a single day?" And I'm like, because
Hmm.
you look at your one day as one day, but I look at it as 24 hours. So let's again remove the 8 hours for sleep. So we now down to 16 hours, right? In that
Hmm.
16 hours, I can break that up into 4 unique days. They don't have to be 4 hours each, but it's for a remote worker, it's great because if you have to do certain kinds of like deep thinking work, then lighter work,
Yes.
then meetings, and maybe wind down email management, that's 4 days that you've broken up in your one job. And you use your brain in deep focus modes in pockets. So your brain is
Right.
actually optimized. So for me, my day actually goes like let's say from 6 to 10. That's like I have a slow morning routine. I might have coffee. I love qigong, so I do a little yoga or qigong or stretching. Very crucial
Hmm.
because we're sitting a lot. Um,
Yes.
and I do deep work. So that is like, do not disturb, do not knock on my door, which is tough for a
Yes.
parent. I know that, and you have to get kids off to school. But like, if you can find that time from 8 to 10, for instance, and you just get deep work, research, maybe if you want to journal, if you want to just listen to music and dance around your room, that is sort of like that space when your brain is in that. I never remember the brainwave patterns. You have alpha, theta, beta, but when you're
Hmm.
just up in the morning, so if you're like a 5 a.m. club kind of guy, like that Robin Sharma book, I just finished it last night, 5 a.m. club. If you're like
Right.
a 5 a.m. person before the kids are up, you can use that space to do certain things: journal, stretch, read, meditate, pray, because your brain is in that headspace. So in my day, of the 16 hours I have left, 6 a.m. to 10 is that morning. Focus on myself, just plan the day, meditate, just be in the moment, journal if I feel like journaling. And of course, when I get to work, it's writing, or it might be
We,
design, or it might be strategizing. Like I actually spent yesterday morning making my notes for today's podcast. So because we're
right.
fresh, right? So that's 6 to 10. From 10 to 2, I do what I would call movement, which is like gym time, going to pick up checks. Maybe if I want to stop and see a friend for coffee or have a meeting with somebody, that's the movement built in there. So that would be
Okay.
10 to 2. And then from about 3 to 7, I do radio. So
Hmm.
that's 3 days so far in my one day. So I morning routine, midday
Right.
movement, radio in the afternoon, and then 7 to 10 I don't plan. I just leave it. So if I have to wrap up admin, if I feel like writing, if I feel like watching TV, you of course need that pocket of space. But that
Yes.
one day has now become 3 to 4 days. And
Yes.
when you look at time differently, you realize how much more you actually have. So instead of
Yes.
with a 1 day mindset, live in a 24-hour mindset. So I actually go through 4 days every one day, which here's the coolest part about it. At the end of
Hmm.
the day, and the end of the year, when everybody's doing their Spotify wrapped and they're looking at their year that went by, they're looking at
Right.
365 days. I'm looking at like 12 or 1300 days
100 days. Hmm.
because I look at
Oh,
it differently.
definitely an interesting take. I know it's time management is something a lot of remote workers struggle with, and it's very interesting to hear a different perspective. It is an episode that I have upcoming as well on how to manage your time and the techniques that you can use to help you, and it involves things like deep focus and breaking up your days into like 25-minute slots and those kinds of things that really help you get going, so
Yeah.
that's to come still. But in all your rules, right, how do you prevent burnout? Because that can get, I think that's something I haven't quite experienced yet. I do get tired, and
Hmm.
you do get to a point where it feels like a lot because you're juggling a lot of roles. In my case, it's worker, mommy, myself, all of those things. You still have to pick up kids, you have to come back, you have to do a lot of things. But in your case, you're doing a lot of different roles because you are writer, you are business owner, you are um, coach, all of those things.
Yeah.
How do you prevent burnout? How do you manage your stress and keep from getting to that point where you're like, I'm just done?
I would say in my experience, the number one way to prevent burnout is to burn out, because I did, and
Yeah.
it's no, it's sad, but I suppose not realizing, having a business for about 12 years, not realizing 16-hour days, not eating on time, not
Oh.
moving
Hmm.
would lead to something, is because I had the vitality of my late 20s into early 30s.
Yes.
And the biggest lesson when I was around 37, 38 was when it was actually during COVID. So during, which nobody wants to talk about ever. They don't even want to hear the word lockdown.
Yeah.
But just a flashback a bit, in 2020, when the world stopped, my business was digital and responsible for marketing. And I had some
Right.
companies like supermarkets that actually were still running. So while
Right.
everyone was having secret COVID parties, our work ramped up ridiculously, because now they were trying to save their businesses.
Right.
We had COVID outbreaks in stores, we had juggling stuff. So I
Hmm.
actually, at the end of 2020, around Christmas time, I found myself around Boxing Day, or the 27th, at the end of that year, flat on my bed, could not get off the bed.
Wow.
Of course, I didn't want anybody to worry, and everything was closed. So I remember
Yes.
going to the doctor in early January, doing my blood tests, and having all my markers look perfectly normal.
Hmm.
Doctors, just multiple doctors, just looking at me and going, you have anxiety, you have adrenal fatigue, which is burnout,
Hmm.
you have whatever, but your markers are fine, so you should be jumping around like a
Fine.
rabbit, you should be fine. And I actually was so burnt out, which is a really, really important thing for your listeners to know, that burnout sounds like I'm just really tired all the time. But when you've completely burnt out, when the flame was almost extinguished, it's getting off my bed. I never forgot, in early January, getting off my bed, brushing my teeth, and being so exhausted by that I fell back
Hmm.
asleep. And then I had to then reach out to clients. I didn't want. I only talked about this privately a few times, so I didn't want clients in 2021 to know that I was done for. I was convinced I was dying. I mean, like, I just,
Right.
like, this can only be death. What else could it be? This feels terrible. And it
Hmm.
took me, I not just had burnout, but I also had brain fog from it, which is a real, real, real
Yes.
thing. And it took me, I'm a writer. I can go to an event and churn out a press release in about 25 minutes, which is why people hire me. I can interview somebody for, like, with Newsday. I would sometimes get a last minute request. Hey, can you do an interview? But we need it for print today. Deadline is midday. Oh, well, it's 10:30 and we don't even have the person to interview. So I have to call the person,
Okay.
find them, make sure they have photos, interview them, edit it, run it through. And I could churn that out in 20 minutes. And in January of 2021, I spent 90 minutes writing a 2-line email to my clients, just trying to say, ChatGPT did not exist back then,
No.
trying to say, hi guys, I will be off for a week, but please contact so and so if you need any assistance. And I remember looking at the clock and going, you just spent 90 minutes trying to write an email, because the words weren't computing on the page
Yep.
brain. And I thought I was done for. I thought my business was over, my health was over. So the best way to prevent burnout is to burn out, I guess. And what I have learned since from burning out is quite a few interesting things, which are how key diet,
Yes.
consistency of that diet, movement. So
Hmm.
I was one of those people that, I live near the Queen's Park Savannah. I think it's still the largest roundabout in the world. I'm not sure, but I would be driving around it several times a day, and I would go, "Why are these people walking? That does nothing." Like, I would just, like,
Yes.
it just didn't. But then I did so much research into it. Walking. as a remote worker is really hard. Sometimes you get 2,000, 3,000 steps a day if you're at your desk. But
Yes.
walking is so crucial. So step number one is movement, right?
Yes.
Movement creates what who did I think it was there's a great coach I spoke to a while ago. I think he said motion creates emotion. And when I got to walking, I actually was only hitting 3,000 and 5,000. So if you're one of those people, again, takeaway for today, what gets measured gets managed. So
Yes.
get a step counter, go in the pharmacy. If you don't have a device that does it like a watch or a phone, just put it on your hip and measure your steps. Aim for 5,000 and 7,000. Your benchmark is 10. So what I learned is I would walk after work. Even when I'm working, I would get up and walk. I have a
Yeah.
skip rope. I might just do some skipping. I might do some, like maybe some push ups, some squats, just a little bit of movement. So, micro workouts are a huge thing now because
Yes.
there was a study recently that said working out for 1 hour a day, if you're a sedentary worker, actually shows no baseline health improvements. That was just the baseline benchmark health. Now, anybody that works out for 1 hour a day, you talk to people in the gym, you feel the endorphin, you feel better. But
Yes.
in longevity, it showed no improvement. But micro workouts, stopping every 90 minutes and just doing something to get your heart rate above 120, just feel that sort of chest thumping if you don't have a device. Break a little sweat if you can. I understand not everyone wants to sweat in the middle of the day, but
Yeah.
right? So movement was one of the things that really worked for me. But then in terms of diet and exercise, sorry, in terms of diet, what we are in the middle of is what is not being spoken about enough. Yes, we talk about non-communicable diseases or NCDs, but
Hmm.
even from our government standpoint here, we have a Ministry of Health that just puts out flyers on diabetes. Now, if you have diabetes, it's too late. But what people don't realize is what a lot of people have is actually insulin resistance, and
Yes.
diabetes happens at the end of that stage. So
Right.
I would say you have to look at your diet holistically. I don't want to overburden people with too much information that
Yeah.
it's undoable. So instead of saying like, oh, just aim for a Mediterranean diet or like veggies and protein or whatever,
Mhm.
I would say reduce your sugar intake so it stops your
Yes.
crashes. Go and get. I tell everybody we go to the pharmacy and get that finger prick test. Uh,
Yes.
90, it's 80, it's 120. That's fine. But if you can do an HbA1c test, it actually looks
Right.
at insulin over 3 months and it sees
Hmm.
how your body's dealing with that insulin. And you might actually find that you're pre diabetic, which means
Yes.
you can reverse it. And great news, even people with the 6.5 and over, I've seen people 6.5 and over is diabetic. There are
Yes.
people, if you go on Reddit forums, that were at 10, which is insane obesity and insane
Yes.
levels of insulin resistance, and they've come back down to pre-diabetic levels. So
Hmm.
you want to move, you want to eat better,
Eat.
you want to lower your
Hmm.
sugar, you want to get more fiber intake because that also helps with insulin resistance. You want to
Right.
build muscle. I mean, there's so many women in the gym that I go to that they're not trying to be bodybuilders, but the biggest consumer of not to stay too far from the burnout question, but the biggest of glucose is muscles, right?
Hmm.
If you build muscle, it means that your body's going to vacuum up more glucose.
Yeah.
So if you
That's
love
right.
sweets, go to the gym and gain some muscle, right? Just keep at it. That's a reason why, coming back to walking, that people walked after meals because your legs are your biggest muscle group. So after
Yes.
you eat, you don't go and do a marathon, you just take a light
No. Take a light. Yes.
and it
Exactly.
activates the leg muscles. So the glucose from that meal really, gets into there. Now, in terms of diet and exercise, it's very simple. Just less sugar, more fiber, more veggies, more protein, move more, get 10,000
Hmm.
steps in a day. Because here's the best part about walking. Whenever I'm stuck, I on anything creatively or writing or business problem, like we have a lot of challenges when you're dealing with executives on what they want in business. I go for a walk because there's
Right.
something we're meant to walk. Human beings are foragers. We're meant to walk for our food and hunt. So
Yes.
when we move, we our creative juices literally get flowing. It helps with digestion. People don't know that walking even improves peristalsis, digestion, and how things move through your body. So the basics, just more movement, like
Hmm.
10% more movement a day, 10% in your diet,
Yeah.
10% in your meditation or prayer if you're religious, if you're not religious, then just sit in silence. If that's not for you, follow a guided meditation. If none of that
Yeah.
is for you, journal. If that isn't
Yes.
for you, sit and watch the birds go by. But it's really important to aim for a life that is more balanced. And that comes right back down to time management because
Mm-hmm.
most people say, I don't have time for all these things you're talking about. And then I break down their week and they have 40 hours that they do nothing with. And I go, yeah, you do. So now you have like 40 hours. Let's talk meal prep on a Sunday.
Yes.
Let's walking twice a week. So, very simple and effective ways to prevent burnout are those things.
Mhm.
But where I actually started when I first burnt out is in simple movement in the morning. So if you
Yeah.
look up like yoga with Adrian on YouTube, just very beginners yoga. We have
Mm-hmm.
local yoga practitioners that would offer YouTube as well.
Yes.
You can yoga is not complicated. Yoga is just movement.
It is not. Yeah.
If that's complicated, qigong.
And then there's always the University of YouTube. You can go on YouTube and find anything, it is, everything is so accessible now, and I just want to point out, I am a advocate of work-life balance, because I find one of the things w- remote workers do is we're always connected,
Yeah,
because we're not commuting. So
yeah,
we don't have that start time or that end time or that
yes,
start routine or end routine that most people do. Um, you're always connected because, like you said, your phone is everything. I can do everything from my phone. I can connect with my clients, I can have meetings, I can do every single thing off of my phone.
yes,
And I have found that it is a blessing and a curse,
yeah,
because it allows me to be connected, but it allows me to stay connected. And that is a problem, because staying connected when I'm trying to do downtime, time with my children, that kind of thing, it is very distracting. So I have set timers on my phone. My do not disturb for work apps goes on at a certain time. It comes back, it goes off at a certain time, just because I need to be present. And I found that one of the things when I started remote work
yeah,
was that I would respond to emails the minute I got them.
yes,
So it would be 9 o'clock in the night, because we're working with people in different time zones. And I would see an email and find myself responding to it. And I realized I'm
no,
not sleeping because
no,
I'm responding to email. I am not turning off. And I found that was my burnout. I didn't go like all the way down, but I started to feel like this is creeping into my life, because there was no separation
Mhm.
of personal and professional. And that is what I find happens a lot with remote workers, because we are not going anywhere, we're not dressing up, we're not doing certain things. It really blurs the line between personal and professional, and you really have to reclaim it, because you will find yourself getting stressed out,
Yes,
and I want to take that into the other question, which is, if I was starting out my remote journey now, that would be the one thing I would tell myself, make sure to set boundaries, make sure that I stick to my boundaries. That was important, because I would set them and not stick to them. But make sure that I separated my work from my life, because both are important, but they are not so important that they have to happen all at the same time. So
yeah.
in terms of the what you've learned as a remote worker, in terms of, let's start with skills. What do you think are some crucial skills that remote workers should have?
In terms of like technical or just life skills.
So let's start with technical skills, and then we'll move into life skills after.
Okay, so technical skills, I mean, it would vary by your profession, right? So I'm an
Right.
advocate for continuous learning. Like we going back to that, commuting. Let's talk about the
Hmm.
commuter. Well, I have friends I commute 3 hours a day. I don't have the luxury of walking from my bed 3 feet to the other room to work. And I go,
Hmm.
yeah, but I actually don't have the luxury of sitting in my car for 3 hours a day and listening to all the podcasts and YouTube videos I want
Yes.
to listen to or the audiobooks that I want to listen to. So grass is always greener. So wherever you are, continuous learning. The University of
Yes.
YouTube, I love that phrase,
Yes.
is
Yes.
one outlet. If you're in like digital like myself, you have Coursera.
Right.
I think 40, $50 a month. If you
Hmm.
can't manage that, if you have a business, write it off as an expense. HubSpot. So it really depends on what you want to learn and do. So
Yes.
my approach to learning, like I just literally, I like just completed LinkedIn learning on Final Cut
Yes.
for video editing, which is great. But then I was taught sort of academically on that. Then I go and type in Final Cut hacks for like YouTuber beginners on YouTube.
Right.
And then I see what the guys who've been doing it for like 15 years and have huge followings, how fast they get through. So I pair, this is all informal learning because it's not university.
Yes.
But if we
Hmm.
call the YouTube, if we call like LinkedIn learning or Coursera or HubSpot the formal digital learning, there's informal learning from people who can teach you
Yes.
faster. And of course, find people in your space, part of community, go and
Yes.
apprentice with them,
Network.
go and
Hmm.
network with them, go and say, hey, I don't know anything about podcasting, but I see that you have a podcast. Can I come in and sit? And in return, maybe I can help you with your social post because I'm a graphic designer. So
Yeah.
there are ways to learn those technical skills. And of course, things like if you have a Mac or an iPhone or a Samsung or a camera, go and search like how to maximize those devices so you're
Yes.
using them properly because
Yes.
you can do shortcuts on your computer that saves so much time. So
Yes.
it's all technical learning. And if you can just spend an hour a day just learning something, so every like I every couple weeks I cycle what I'm learning. Sometimes I'm learning
Hmm.
in wellness space, and then I cycle and I learn things in the digital marketing space. Like I
Yes.
listen to Gary Vaynerchuk, and then after I'm like, okay, I've had enough of Gary. He's great, but the energy's all the way up here, and I'm like not ready.
Yes.
So then I would go over to like email marketing on HubSpot and learn that as well, because
Hmm.
all of that is crucial. And I don't think we spend enough time taking or appreciating. I just want to throw this back. Like I have wanted to learn video editing for like 20 years. When I left UE, which I have to say, love the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. I'm a proud student in both
Yes.
under and postgrad. I think it's a fantastic institution, and we don't even appreciate that enough
Hmm.
in terms of the learnings there. But when I was there, I left in 2007. I wanted to learn film. That was non-existent, and
Yes.
so I never forgot going to calling a friend and being like, "Well, you do video editing." So I actually I didn't drive at the time, so I took like two maxis to get to his house in Diego Martin, picked up
Hmm.
a stack of DVDs, came home, and I had to like plug these DVDs in. And this is 2007, so my computer's lagging. It's the pinwheel of death. It's
Yes.
integrating software and the video player at the same time. And now you can literally do that on a phone.
On a phone. Yes.
We don't appreciate that enough. And Gen Zs and Gen Betas and Alphas that will follow take that for granted and
Hmm.
instead spend so much time just on TikTok doom scrolling. So, number
Yeah.
one, weaponize the devices that you own.
Yes.
It's not about being productive all the time. It's about being intentional all the time.
Yes.
And you can
Agreed.
intentionally rest, you can intentionally learn, you can intentionally work. So,
Hmm.
my takeaway is in terms of technical skills, go and find the people that are doing it great and then find some formal courses, especially
Hmm.
for employment.
Yeah, that's so true. I think one of the things we take for granted here in Trinidad and in the Caribbean is networking and the power of networking. Like I feel like LinkedIn is such an underutilized resource.
Yeah.
There's so many people that you can connect with, and they're just waiting for you to connect. I mean, that is the basis of their platform to connect, right? There is such a body of information on LinkedIn, but we use Facebook, we use Instagram. We don't really take stock of what LinkedIn is. And I call LinkedIn corporate Facebook. I really do
It is.
because it is what it is.
It
It
is.
it really is about networking in that corporate space. And I have found great resources for the podcast, for my job, because this is new to me and learning about it as I go along. It's like, where do I go? What do I do? There isn't a school of podcasting, but you learn from looking at others and getting feedback from others. And I've been getting that a lot. So I just want to put a plug in here, guys. LinkedIn. If you don't have a LinkedIn account, go on it. If you have one, update it, please, because it is more than just a way to put yourself out there. It is a way to network and get to meeting the people that are top voices and can help you in your career. So, in terms of life skills, now that we've covered the tech skills,
Yes.
what do you think would be something that a remote worker should have, or want to have as a remote worker?
So I'll follow on your LinkedIn point, because LinkedIn can be a horrifying platform when you first look at it.
Yes.
It's full of, and forgive me because my shade out here. It's full of, I am so honored, and wow, imagine my surprise when I was named. And it's all about ego. It's a lot of like ego driven posts. Now, that's the equivalent of me running into somebody in a fete and I'm going, I was so honored last week when I received this prestigious award for what. And I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna get a drink. I'll be right back to finish this conversation.
Yes.
I'm not interested in that. So
Hmm.
Gary Vaynerchuk is really great at this. I learned this like 10 years ago. Break through the noise. So, actually, no, step one, before you even post anything, just sit and listen. Remove the people, mute them if they're doing that.
Hmm.
Go and follow top minds like yourself, follow the
Yes.
local top minds, follow the international top minds. Sit, listen, observe. That we have two ears, one mouth. Just spend as much time using the two ears in terms of listening in to what
Right.
people are trying to teach you and what they're sharing for free. So that's step
Yes.
number one. Step number two, break through the noise. I barely post accomplishments. If I have received awards,
Neither do
I
I.
barely
Yeah.
post anything like that, because I think this is a lot of ego shouting. So what I started to do on LinkedIn late last year was actually start telling stories of entrepreneurship, stories of
Hmm.
resilience, even touching on something that nobody would dare talk about on LinkedIn, which was trauma. And it was terrifying, because I was like, if anybody's going to hire me or wants to hire me or wants to work with me, and I'm there talking about trauma. Now, I'm not talking about trauma from the feel sorry for me trauma sort of
Right.
approach. I'm talking about it from the alchemy approach, which is take trauma and transfer it into something that's valuable, meaning
Right.
take lead and turn it into gold. And
Yes.
I was very, very skeptical of doing it, because I was like, I'm going to get attacked by people. The
Hmm.
opposite happened. I had people that were going through severe traumas. I had people that had survived cancers. I had people that had survived domestic abuse issues, corporate work life, terrible
Right.
bosses. And they would comment on the post like, "Thank you for sharing this," or "Thank you for saying what nobody wants to say." And
Right.
then they would message me on the back end, and these are people I've never met, and we become friends, and they now
Hmm.
support every post that I put out. So break through, listen, look, learn, break through the noise. That's a great place to start LinkedIn as a life skill,
Yes.
especially as a remote worker, and especially when you're looking for work. But
Yes.
don't just try to use it as a like, "Hi guys, I'm unemployed, I have no work."
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes. And that's so true. Like it's not just about airing your dirty laundry,
yeah,
for want of a better term, right? It's not just about saying, hey, I've been unemployed for 6 months. Put something out there that's going to attract interest. Tell
yeah,
people your story in terms of the value that you have, right? Because LinkedIn is like a first interview. People go onto your LinkedIn profile to see what you're about,
yeah,
and get a good sense of, okay, does this person have what it takes? Do I pursue this relationship with this person in a corporate sense?
yeah,
I see a lot in the Caribbean, especially the value of LinkedIn is very, very underrealized because we don't use it the way it's supposed to be used. It is about that ego, like, hey, look at me, pat
yeah,
myself on the shoulder, I did this. It's not about becoming thought leaders in certain areas. And that
yeah,
is where we need to be. You want to aim to be a top voice in your industry so that you are attracting the engagement, the visibility, and the right people to connect with you,
yeah,
especially as a remote worker. That is what you're looking at. So it's not about like on Facebook or Instagram where you're going to connect with everybody and look at everybody's story. It's about being intentional about who you're connecting with, building a network that you can depend on in the times when you do need a job. You can
yeah.
reach out and say, hey, you
Give.
know me. You
Yeah,
know what I can do because you can see my work. That I think is a really big skill and something that I didn't think about until I left my office job. My LinkedIn profile was the same picture that I used And I don't want to say how long ago because then we'll be showing our age, but yeah, it was when I started working way back when. It was the same profile. I never updated it.
Yeah.
And now I see the importance of it, especially for me. I work for a US based company
Yes.
and they use LinkedIn religiously.
On steroids.
They,
Yes.
yes, it
Yes.
is a very different environment, and then that's another thing you have to think about. Uh, Tailoring your LinkedIn profile for the
Absolutely.
um, who you
The
want your
audience.
audience to be.
The
You need
audience.
that because it's not about if you're not looking to work in Trinidad or the Caribbean. It's not about putting out things for here. You have to put things out on a global market so that you are making sense to people.
Yes.
So
So what I would say to add to that point is that as a storyteller, as a writer, and I know some people aren't great at writing, and that's why we have Chat GPT now. And
yes,
I'm not saying to just use it, but you can
no,
actually put your thoughts in. If you're not good at grammar, spelling, or storytelling, any of these things, you can actually voice note it and say, "Hi, I'm thinking about talking about that conference I went. I went to the energy conference and I spoke to them
Mhm.
about renewables and TNT and how we're switching from maybe we're not prioritizing CNG, but we're looking at green hydrogen. But I don't know. Can you help me frame some thoughts?" And it'll
Yes,
give you that, and then say, "Well, I need a LinkedIn post on this." And don't just copy and paste. Put your voice into
no,
it. Because what I've
yes,
learned telling 3,000, 4,000 people's stories is every single person has a story to tell, something to share, something of value to give, even when you think you don't. And the first thing
hmm
you need to do is take the hat off of imposter syndrome and
yes,
also stop trying to be something you're not. So you're right. Don't try to be a thought leader. I had no intention of doing anything other than just sharing stories that would appeal to people so that they
hmm
felt not alone in their trauma, in surviving
yes,
things, in surviving burnout, surviving disease, bad relationships, in surviving bad bosses. I just wanted to people I just wanted people to not feel alone. That was all. The
yeah,
important thing to remember in any form of marketing, in any form of anything you're putting out, is what is the emotion you want people to feel and
yes,
start there. So, in terms of like life skills, LinkedIn is such a great place to start for a remote
yeah,
worker. And it's very cringe. I'm not going to lie. It is very cringe at first. You feel cringe.
yeah,
Push through the cringe.
yeah.
Your
Because you're
friends will
stepping,
walk with
you
you.
you are stepping out of a comfort zone, right?
Yes.
One of the things I've learned from my job is that frame it as a coffee shop conversation, right? Put yourself like you're meeting up with somebody you haven't met up with in a long time and you want to tell them your story. Yes, it is cringe because sometimes you're like, oh, I don't want to say this, especially if you're looking for a job. You're not gonna say, hey, hey, I haven't seen you in forever. I'm looking for a job. No, you want to build that relationship. But it does help take away a little bit of that awkwardness when you frame it like that. Think that you're talking to a friend. But like you said, I think the most important thing is what emotion are you trying to evoke? What are you trying to put out there? And be very mindful about what you're
Yes.
putting out there. That is, I think, the most important thing because I see people put posts up and I'm like, this is not something you want to come back and see 5 years from now.
Yeah.
You're trying you there is a very thin line between thought provoking and controversial. So that is something I think I want to put out there. If you're doing things like this, be very mindful about what you're putting out. Don't just do something because you think, oh, I just want to get stir the pot.
I
No,
want to stir the
be
pot. So
mindful.
that's a
Yes.
really great point, and I do stir the pot. But here, and it probably does cost me bread and butter. It probably does. Now,
hmm
I don't want to work with someone that does not understand that I'm inviting conversation in
Right.
and instead seeing it as me, so you have to be careful. I'm not trying to be controversial for likes, obviously not,
Yes.
but I am trying to encourage a conversation. And if a potential employer or client doesn't understand that, then they're in the wrong space. They're not going to work
hmm
well with me. That's my personality. So a great toolkit for somebody who's an entrepreneur or just seeking to build their personal brand is to look up what is known as the 12 brand archetypes. So
hmm
that's a great thing to look up. So our like Huckleberry is a um, sort of like our tagline is wicked creativity, right? It's
Right.
built right in there. So when you look at the brand archetypes, we're sort of like magician, and I always forget the second one, but there are 12 archetypes. You have hero, you have magician, you have jester. So you look up those, and
Mm-hmm.
what you want to do is get down to two of the 12. You don't want more than two. So I think
Right.
I should really remember what this is, but it's something magician. I think it might be jester magician or something, but it allows
Mm-hmm.
us to be, when we put our posts up, it allows us to be shady, which is something that we've been doing this since 2012, 2014. We actually used to review press ads. We used to take pictures
Mm-hmm.
of press ads and review them on our website and throw shade at the posts. And that was something we were doing in 2016. And then Ryan Reynolds stole the idea from us because he's Deadpool, has a bigger audience. No, but that sort of like throwing shade at things became very
Yes.
popular. To reframe that, Chandler on Friends was a very
Yes.
unique character in the 2000s. Now everybody
Yes.
wants to be Chandler. So again, you might not break through the noise being controversial or shady as much as before, like people were reviewing April Fool's posts yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not interested in that because I've done that for 10 years and now everyone's doing it. So again, after you look, you have to figure out how do you break through the noise, and you have to speak in your voice, which is where the brand
Yes.
archetypes come in, and it gives you a sort of guiding process, what your voice sounds like, what your posts look like. So that's also a great sort of like technical but also life toolkit there
Yes.
that you can use as well. But in terms of like, I wanted to touch on like a little bit of the life skills as well, because as a remote worker, and that's what we're focused on, is, you mentioned it earlier, that work life balance, right?
Balance.
And I try to even find work life blend. And like sometimes people say to me, but you're a writer, that's just semantics. And I go,
No.
words are powerful. We cast spells with words. We get married with words. We tell our children we love them with words. Words are very powerful. And it's not just like, so I understand balance, and sometimes I even look for blend. Um,
Yes.
so by balance, it means that if you're a remote worker and you're looking at life skills, what you want to do is isolate certain things. Like one of them is like, yes, your work life boundaries, right? So
Mhm.
because without boundaries, your peace becomes a casualty of your productivity. And
That's
that is
right.
really rough to deal with. So I have certain things. We're on camera right now, you and I know when we might post this, but I have this space, which is what I meet in. It's
Hmm.
actually just a 90-degree angle off of my desk. And it's just a tiny desk that I picked up at PriceSmart that I'm able to sit here. So I'm in a different space when I'm meeting somebody. That's all.
Yeah.
And maybe a slightly nicer background. But that's all
Yes.
right. So when I'm sitting here, my brain goes, oh, we're meeting. That's
Hmm.
one. I have simple, like little hacks. Like I have a pair of over-the-ear headphones that
Hmm.
I never take it to the gym. I don't wear it around the house. It goes on at my desk because I love to work with music or a podcast or just background sound,
Right.
helps me focus. So I put those on only when I'm at the desk. That signals to my brain we're in work mode. I might have
Hmm.
like a hoodie or two, like for your listeners, I'm in a yellow hoodie. I don't wear
Yes.
it out. It stays on my desk. This is like part of my uniform. Now,
Your
we live in the
uniform.
tropics. It's hot. I get that. If you work at home, you probably don't want to throw too many things on, but just have something. I have a mug that I only use at my desk. I have headphones that I use at my desk. So I have a playlist of songs that I don't listen anywhere else, that I use at my desk, which I just call focus. I just have it on YouTube and I add to it when I hear good stuff.
Hmm.
So it signals to your brain, I'm working now.
Work mode.
When I step out of that, I can throw off the hoodie, throw off the headphones, go and listen to Shensia instead of like Interstellar soundtrack, which is more,
Yes.
and I can change my brain patterns because you're able
Yes.
to hack it that way. So, like life skills, work in one place if it's possible. If you're
Hmm.
working in your bedroom, it's really hard because what that means is like you're working, and I started my business in my bedroom and we're in my room right now, but what it means is that like I'm able to make subtle nudges, because if
Yes.
you work on your bed, which is a huge mistake that everybody makes, when you get
Hmm.
sleep time, your brain goes, are we working,
What are
sleeping,
we doing?
are we eating? You have that donut in bed last night, so it's very confused. So you have to be disciplined, which is all of
Yes.
remote work comes down to discipline,
It
right?
does.
And people that don't succeed at remote work is because they lack discipline. It's not an insult. It's not an
No.
attack. It's just a fact. But the great thing is um,
Hmm.
you can build discipline. So having all those things means that you don't carry from like your work day into your night. So that also touches on like your environment, which is also
Yeah.
very important. So if you're working in a space a lot, you want to rearrange the space a certain way. And a really quick hack for anybody, for your listeners that are tuned in, is different light sources. I
Mhm.
think if I was gonna have a dream job that was none of this, because in the year 2000s this would not have paid me any money. I wanted to be like a lighting architect. I don't even think it's a job. I wanted to go into buildings and design lighting, and people do it now. But so if you only have it, and I see this all the time, if you just have like an overhead light, and that is your light to get ready in your bedroom, it's your light when
Mhm.
you're going out with friends. No, have a lamp that switches on like when you're at work and switches off when you're not at work. So,
Yeah.
and then have like a lamp at your bedside, which you only use at nighttime. So again, what you're trying to do is signal to your brain without having to say to it, we've switched modes. So
Yes.
you can have a diffuser that plays a certain scent, because scent is a powerful human trigger.
Mhm.
So if I put on a scent like chamomile in the nighttime, but then I'm like, oh, my humidifier is here and I'm gonna work, I'll just put on the chamomile again and I sit at my desk. My brain goes, but that's the sleep scent. I get
Yeah.
sleepy. So you can find these little hacks: lighting, scent, types of music, playlists,
Mhm.
and generally these are either low cost or no cost.
Yes, they are. And
But
that's so true. It's as simple as just setting up a space.
yeah,
Like I found that was important for me, that I needed to have a dedicated workspace that was not my bed, was not next to my bed. It just so happened it's out of the room because I couldn't fit a desk there, but that's my commute. I walk across the corridor, and that's enough for me. It in that walk, it's I'm going from mommy, home mode, whatever, I'm going into work mode.
and
And
that's
it really
yeah, that's
it
a
really is critical. It really does. And it's something as simple for me as putting on makeup. I mean, I know we're not on video, but I am public facing in my job, and it's important for me, like there are days you don't feel like doing it, but it's as though I'm getting up to go to work where I would have put on makeup and get dressed up. So I do
yes,
that because it
yeah,
does signal to my brain we're not home, we're not lounging, we're not, just relaxing. We are going to do something, we're going to work. And it really does something to your state of mind. It really, really sets you in that frame of mind.
yes,
Okay, we're not doing the home thing, we're doing the work thing. Let's focus. And then it's very important to be able to turn that off as well. So it does come back to that, like you said, work life balance slash blend. You have to kind of figure it out.
yeah.
And there's so many tools that help you with that.
Mhm.
And you just kind of have to figure out what works for you.
Yeah, so I
And
was going to say to your point. Sorry, I didn't mean
no, go ahead.
cut across you. That critical point you said at the end there, which is you have the ritual to get to work, which a
Yes.
lot of people do. They make their cup of coffee, they might
Yes.
have their playlist, but then at 5 o'clock they kind of like drift around the house, get
Yes.
dinner, and then they're back on their computer, and then they're on their
Mhm.
phone. As you said, 9 p.m. you're responding to
Yeah.
email. No, I have a cutoff point, which is before I
Yes.
started radio, which is my cutoff point in my day now. My cutoff point was going for a walk in the afternoon. So like at some point I would literally finish work. Great, work is done. Gym shorts and a t-shirt on and my cap and I'm out to take a walk. If I'm not taking a walk, I might go and do some errands. But you have that cutting point. But you
Yes.
have to create like a little ritual, a cup of tea and a book that says we're done work. Now,
Yes.
when you're done work, I understand different clients, different work cultures. US is different to
Yes.
Europe, which is different to Trinidad. I have people that tell me I woke up to a message this morning. Yesterday was a public holiday here in Trinidad, and I woke up to I called you yesterday and I sent you a voice note and I sent a message and I didn't hear back from you. It's 8:30. It's 30 minutes into the workday. I'm
Hmm.
one of those people that generally does not respond after 5 p.m. Generally does not attack before 8 a.m. And
Right.
I will screen it. I'll be up to date. So I run a business, so I have to know if it's a crisis, if
Right.
if a business is on fire. I have to know. But
Yes.
generally, 99% of the time, the business is not on fire, but the owner
Hmm.
might have anxiety and they're anxious about something 2 days from.
Yes.
So I have that cutoff point, and I would kind of look at it and screen it. If you can afford it, you could have multiple devices or multiple SIM cards. I don't. I just screen it, and I'm able to
Hmm.
then go for my walk and listen to my podcast and end my day. But you have to have those rituals to cut off. and the price of accessing you has to be really, really high. So people know
Mm-hmm.
that about me. You don't just call me and start to talk about, 3 minutes in, I'm going to say, it sounds like you need a meeting for this. I'm looking
Yes.
at 2 p.m. today. Does that sound good? And people hate you for it. They
Mm-hmm.
get really angry. They go like, "You can't talk now," especially in Trinidad. "You can't talk now."
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
I can't because I'm doing something else. And I've had to explain to clients, how would you feel if I'm on a call with you and another client calls and they start talking to me and I go, well, I'm dealing with somebody, but they're not important. Let me end this meeting and talk to you instead. You'd feel insulted. So let's
Mm-hmm.
actually have, like one of the things that I try to encourage with all my clients is kindness through and through.
Mm-hmm.
Like we try to be kind in everything that we do. So, but yeah, having that cutoff point is absolutely, so maybe the makeup comes off. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah,
you have a cup of
it
tea.
does. No,
Yeah.
it is. To me, it is de-stressing. So a hot shower, a hot cup of tea, whatever it takes to turn your brain back off, because it really is about turning it on when you have to work and turning it off when it's time to relax, and that is important. I've
Yeah.
also started not going on my phone after a certain hour, because not just for the work thing, but just to set your mind into relaxation mode. That enough blue light. I sit behind my desk so often, my phone, it was becoming something that I would sit down behind all the time. I would find my girls talking to me and I'm on my phone, and I started doing this thing. You're talking to me, I put my phone down, because it's something I find a lot of people doing. You're talking and you're still in your phone, but you're listening, but you're kind of listening. So it's
Yeah.
something I've started to do as well. Just be very
Present.
mindful and present of what I'm doing. And just to wrap up, what I wanted to ask you, and this is, what what advice would you give someone who is looking to go into remote work? Because this is not an easy journey,
No.
by any means. And people sometimes think it is, because it's like, oh, I'm just working from home. But there's a lot that goes into it. So what would you tell someone who is considering a career in remote work, and what you would have told yourself many years ago when you started this journey?
Yeah, I mean, I started this journey before it was a phrase.
Yes.
I was actually inspired by, I had imposter syndrome until I read a story that the chief designer at IKEA, if I remember
Hmm.
correctly, he was somebody very senior at IKEA internationally. He actually
Right.
left his job to open a one-person design studio, and everybody laughed at him in 2011, 2012. I will never work. Nobody is interested in you. And just one sec.
Sure.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So
That's
lead
okay.
designer of IKEA, he left his job. He goes off to start a one. Why would you leave a company like IKEA? Why would you leave insurance? Why would you leave, stock options
Hmm.
and open a one-person design studio? And he said, because I don't think I need that to be chained to a desk every day and show up every
Hmm.
day. I love my job, and a lot of people love their jobs, and a lot of
Yes.
actually, I think a lot more people don't love their jobs. But the people who love their jobs, I'm really happy for you. I was never built. I felt like I was never built. Actually started off working with an event and a conference company, a summit management company, and we work with Fortune 500 thinkers, doers, leaders, and we actually had to get these people to a conference site. And for Fortune 50 speakers,
Hmm.
time is more important than money. So asking them to take 2 days off in the week to come to a conference to speak, put together a presentation when they're running a multi-billion-dollar operation, was tough, right? And I had to learn all these little, tips and tricks to get them there.
Yes.
But the thing that I realized is that they were quite happy in those jobs generally, and they were at the top of their game. If you're
Yes.
not built for that, like I don't think I'm built to sit in an office 8 hours a day, then I would
Hmm.
say number one, start a side hustle. Find
Right.
People say find something you love and you never work a day in your life. Partially true.
Hmm.
You have to find that niche, that intersection of what you love doing with what the market actually needs and what they would actually pay for. Because a lot of people think, well, I'm just going to buy stuff on Timu and resell it on Instagram. And I'm like, but I can actually buy stuff on Timu directly
For myself, yes.
myself. Even if I don't have a credit card, I might be able to go to the. So you have to find that intersection of things you love that people will pay for and pay well enough for, and start that as a side hustle. If you're looking to go into remote work, then maybe you can just start something small. If, like for me, it started as a writing service, I actually was just
Hmm.
doing small level writing. Um, and then I got into journalism. And then within a decade, I was actually writing for ministers here and senior business leaders and companies, and a lot of press releases that go out are basically my words. I always laugh because I go, the CEO of what company said what? Because I remember writing that, right?
Right.
But it started as a small test your side hustle, right?
Hmm.
So that's if you're considering leaving your job to go into remote work, right?
Yeah.
If you want to get out your job entirely and apply into a remote work position, you have to have the credentials. You should have
Yes.
a website or at least a social presence that is active that says what you do. You want to
Hmm.
ensure that when people search your name, you're findable, meaning your SEO ranking, that sort of thing. You have
Yes.
to be publishing posts and blogs and whatever. So you have to ensure that there is a perception of who you are out there. That's
Hmm.
that's that's a as much as I don't like it, it's the reality we live in.
It
I'm
is.
very I'm a I don't know an extroverted introvert or something. I don't care to you will not find a lot of posts about me out there, but I have to make that effort today because that's the world we live in. So
Right.
apart from social proof, you also
Hmm.
need educational proof. You want to have
Right.
global certifications. I know that the University of the West Indies is in the top 4% of global universities, top 2% of Caribbean and Latin America.
Hmm.
Somebody in Massachusetts who's trying to hire you or Boston does not know where that is. So
Yes.
what they will know is a Google certification, a Meta
Yes.
certification in my field, or if you're doing with customer facing things, then you do customer relations courses.
Yes.
You can
Hmm.
pay for LinkedIn Learning about $42 a month and do a bunch of courses. So those are the trajectories that you want to think about, and that's the tactical. How do you get into remote
Yeah.
work? But then there's the overall strategic and the softer but tougher skills, which are you have to have a certain level of discipline, and you have
Yes.
to have almost Herculean amounts of resilience that people don't think they'll need,
Yeah.
because you're working in your pajamas. You never have to leave the house to buy. You never have to leave to get food. Um, it sounds, as you say so many times, it sounds so comfy, but
Yes.
remote work is an incredible amount of resilience. And that's because it's generally solitary work, even when you work with
Yes.
a big company and there are people that you talk to. But I will just say this, talking to somebody on Slack or Google Meet is not the same as bouncing them up by a water cooler in the
That's
office
right.
and being able to vent or talk or share or creatively
Hmm.
brainstorm. It's very different. So, resilience is anytime somebody asks me about entrepreneurship, I say, what do you need the most? Not capital, not friends and family, not customers. I say you need resilience because there's that phrase, fall 6 times, get up seven. I say anybody who says that has not fallen 6 times. But a remote worker and an entrepreneur, you're going to fall dozens of times and it's going to
Yeah.
be embarrassing. It's going to be hard. And what is more important is getting up and being resilient. Like what I've
Hmm.
learned about that is people, when I say resilience, it also means that people think it's sort of like a you can take a beating, and
No.
that's what I thought resilience was for years. But it's not really. It's actually
No.
resilience is actually a very small space in you. Resilience is your response to what
Yes.
happens in your job, in your life, etc. It's that tiny, powerful space. I think it's the most powerful space in a human being. That gap between what happened to you or happens to you and how you choose to respond to it.
Respond. Hmm.
It's the equivalent of somebody throwing a fist at you in a bar brawl or something, and what happens automatically is you throw a fist back, but you don't have to. You can pause and say, "Do I need to do this?" And that is what resilience is about. So, as a remote worker, you're on your own. You have a lot of decisions to make on your own. There's nobody to complain or vent to or share with, and
Hmm.
um, when you're making that decision to get into it, ensure that like your house is in order, ensure that mentally you'll have the resilience for it, and then
Yes.
you go on weworkremotely.com and you start
Yes.
applying. You go to all the remote work sites.
Mhm.
There's a guy that has shortlist HR here, and he posts it on
Yes.
LinkedIn, and he's great with it. And he actually posted about how to find a remote job. So you can that's a local Trinidad as a Trinidadian. So that's when you go about it. But you don't just say, "I hate coming to an office. I gonna find a remote job." It doesn't
Yes.
work that way, because the last thing that people forget as well, you're responsible for your taxes. You're
Mm-hmm.
responsible for declaring things to your government, and a lot of remote workers say don't pay taxes, but
Mm-hmm.
the Board of Inland Revenue is becoming the revenue authority here. They're starting to track more of how people are
Yeah.
spending money here. They're starting to link things together. You want to have your taxes together. There's an amnesty right now. You want to find somebody, a friend who did accounting, or hire an accountant that could work
Mm-hmm.
with you, because as we said at the start, what gets measured gets managed. We talked a
Mm-hmm.
lot about time, but if
Yeah.
we are going to be out of time soon, another time we'll money, because that's the other thing
Yes.
that we have to measure and manage.
Yeah, I will definitely have another one of these because I think that you have a really unique perspective on being a remote worker. It's different from mine because we are on different paths, on a similar journey, but different paths. So I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come on my podcast and for us to get to see each other because we don't get to see each other enough. But thank you so much for your insight. I really appreciate it, and I think my listeners are going to enjoy it. Guys, if you have any questions for Kieran, you can feel free to put it in the comments and I'll be sure to get it to him and we'll answer them. Okay. So thank you so much, Remote Islanders, and you'll be hearing from me soon. Okay.
Thank you.